Recently I have passed the Databricks Data Engineering Professional Certificate with a score of 90%, which makes me really happy. But overall experience was really stressful, exam was difficult, and if I would need to prepare for it one more time, I would do that completely differently. Today I'm going to share with you my experience, well, part of it you already know. I'm also going to share with you the materials which I believe are absolute basics if you want to pass this professional certificate, including some repository, and then a list of the articles which I think are really important to go through and make sure that you understand. Those will help you to clear some of the questions and clarify some of the terms. Well, basically I'm going to share with you things which I would love someone share with me before me attempting the exam. And before we start, if you know other materials which you consider as useful, helpful to pass this professional certificate, please put the link in the comment section. I'm sure that many people will appreciate. So when it's going about experience, you know that feeling when you are submitting results and you don't really know if you are going to pass. It's like a 50-50. Well, it wasn't the case for me at all. I was 100% sure that I'm going to fail. I was angry, frustrated, especially angry at myself. I was already thinking about registering myself for the next exam. I was thinking on what I'm going to say to my body that I have failed the exam, and I was angry on myself on how I have prepared for that exam. Actually, I assigned myself 3 days before exam, well, because I'm working with the Databricks for a while and I help some people, I do some consultancy, how the architecture should look like in the data engineering, and this builds some ego. So I had some ego before the exam, and what can go wrong, you know? 3 days of preparation, I will review some materials where many things can go wrong. For instance, I spent that time reviewing mostly Delta Life tables, which are not even in the scope of the exam. So there is this old saying, ego is not your amigo, and I really understand it right now well. And when it's going about the exam itself, it's 2 hours exam with 60 questions. For each question you will have 4 possible answers, and those questions, they can be really long and require a lot of attention to make sure that you really understand the content of that question. Every single detail can count, can decide which answer is correct. In terms of the answers, they can be really similar. So you need to be really focused, like for those 2 hours or whatever it will take for you. It took me 94 minutes. You need to be really focused. I finished after 94 minutes, although I still had the time to review the questions and answers. But to be frank, I was tired, I was out of the focus, I didn't feel comfortable, and I was really frustrated. So I just decided to finish that basically nightmare, and I was just ready to make a proper preparation and sign myself for the exam in 2 or 3 weeks. On the other hand, to be honest with you, some of the questions are not really difficult, but require to remember some things. And those not necessarily are difficult, like what is the default processing time in Spark streaming. And it's of course half a second. But during the exam, when you are stressed, it's not so obvious. And some questions require you to remember things which are not so easy, like when you have a delta log, Databricks calculates statistics for some number of columns. For what exactly number of columns? Does the number of columns for which it calculates statistics change or not if some columns are nested? So those are the things which you need to remember, and I really believe that it's good to review appropriate set of the documentation, because the documentation as whole, it's really extensive, but to review the specific part of it, I think it's really valuable before the exam. Maybe you will find something what you don't know, or maybe you will find the things which you understand, but you will just remind yourself default values or how the delta log looks like and similar things. Don't ignore the exam as I did. It was really stupid. Be well rested and make sure that you review appropriate set of the documentation, which can really save you some stress. All the materials you will find in the comment section. Now I will take you through the links which I have and materials which I recommend. If you have some other ideas about the materials which can be useful for others, please share them in the comment section as well. Here comes collected by me links, which I think are very useful if you want to pass Databricks Data Engineering Professional Certificate exam, and they are split into 3 categories. At the beginning, basics, meaning you want or not, this is really the starting point for preparing for the Databricks Professional Certificate exam. Then there are articles which personally believe that are worth reading just to remind yourself some information or maybe to learn something new. And there is a good chance that if you will go through those articles, you will actually have answers for some of the questions on the exam. And at the end, something what is not really mandatory but rather interesting. And all the links I will place in the comment section under the movie, so you don't have to stay with me to till the end of the movie. Nevertheless, I will go through some of that link and I will make some comments what is important and what you can really ignore. So the decision is up to you. So first things first, this is a page where you will find the information, basically the overview of the Databricks Data Engineering Professional Certificate. I'm sure that you already know that page. Once you will scroll down here, you are going to find exam guide. So a short PDF document describing basics of the exam, like this is 2-hour exam, the price and the validity. And then you are going to have a scope. So we will see here a Databricks tooling like a Delta Clone or Databricks SQL service, which they are pushing a lot recently. We will have here information about the data processing, that batch, incremental optimization. We will need to learn for the exam the things like CDC or CDF. So this is new comparing to Associate. They were not asking about that previously on the Associate. Then we are going to have a data modeling with the slowly changing dimensions, very important for the exam. Some security and governance, monitoring and logging, testing and deployment. You see it by yourself. The thing is that once you read that scope, it doesn't look really scary, while in the reality, questions are really tough about it. And below we will have few sample questions, so of course just check it out. And this is the first thing to check. The next things to check is this is a primary repository which intended to prepare you for the exam. This repository is not enough for the exam, but I think that doing that repository, it's absolutely must for the exam. And actually here will be a link to the Customer Academy. Each of us can register and log in, just I'm doing that right now. But depends if you are a Databricks customer or not, the price for this course will be different. Here I'm logged in as not as a Databricks customer, so the price is 1,000, which I think that it's just crazy. I don't think that anyone personally would pay this amount of money. And once you will go inside, you will see here a section dedicated for the Advanced Data Engineering course, Advanced Data Engineering Certificate exam with the Databricks. And I don't want to comment the quality of the videos as such in that course, but the repository, which you will find here, is simply amazing. And now, I don't have access to the latest repository from that course, so that's something I cannot share with you. I'm sure that sooner or later this repository will be available on the GitHub, and once it will be available, I will let you know. Nevertheless, I have a repository from 2023. And that's how this repository looks like. I have it available because it's publicly available on the GitHub. I will put a link to that repository also in the comment section. And in terms of the scope, this repository is covering really a lot of aspects they will ask you about on the exam. Now, the problem with that repository is that in 2024, unfortunately, this repository will not work. Nevertheless, if you don't have access to the Customer Academy and to 2024 course for free, then this repository is something amazing to just copy and go one by one. And what we are going to find here, it's, well, of course, different lessons organized in the categories, starting from streaming design patterns. And in each lesson, you will find some examples of the codes. It's still loading, like here. So you will see that they will be using a lot of Spark streaming, but you are also going to see how they are using that, what parameters they are using, and those things you can expect on the exam. So you can expect that they will basically ask you many questions from that repository. And even maybe what is more important than a code itself, the comments they are writing in the repository, it's very helpful, and they are explaining a lot of concept or even giving a links to some documentation. What I would encourage you to pay special attention is a section number 3, promoting to silver, where you are going to have the information, or in the examples, how to deal with the deduplication, which is a relatively big topic on the exam. So again, you will not run a code, but you can read it. If you don't understand anything, just this is a signal for you to go back to the documentation and spend some time educating yourself. If you will understand, then you can remind yourself materials, or you can read their comments. So you will have here the duplication, quality enforcement, promoting to silver, when to promote and what's the purpose of the silver. You will have here very important section about the slowly changing dimension. This is super important. There are questions, I'm sure you will get multiple questions about the slowly changing dimensions. I will have some links about it to read about it. And you will have also, unfortunately, only one notebook about joining streams. I think that they could elaborate on this more, but still, there you will see here how they are joining a stream and a static table. If you are joining a stream and a static, which one should be on the left and which one should be on the right? When do you should use a watermark? Do you need to use a watermark? And such aspects are really important to understand. The best way is to have some experience in it, but if you don't have experience, then you need to be exposed to some codes, to some examples, and try to figure this out by yourself. And that's how the repository looks like. So again, promoting updates and deletes. This is something also what to be expected, not so much as the CDC, but still, like, you need to understand the concept of change data fit. So if you will find that this is new for you, then you need to do your homework, check the documentation, try to write some examples by yourself, and then crack this code. So if you don't have access to this course, or you need to pay $1,000 for it like me, then I highly encourage you to at least go to the GitHub and check out this course from 2023, because it will still help you a lot. Okay? And the last thing about the basics, it's really a documentation. So they have a really good documentation. Databricks has really good documentation, but it's really extensive. And it would be the easiest for me to say that you need to go through all of that over here and basically read page by page about the notebooks, compute, structure, streaming. And if you have a time, that's still a good way, that's still a good thing to do. But I mean, there is plenty of that. It's really, the documentation, it's really enormous. It's really good. It's easy to read. But there is so much about it, and you need to know about the Delta Lake, data warehouse. You need to know a bit about the machine learning. It's hard to point out the section which is not necessary, maybe besides the Delta Life tables, which currently, as per today, is not in the scope of the exam. That is why I try to go through the documentation and just figure out links to the articles, which I believe are really good to read. After doing the repository, not before, rather after doing the repository, it will remind you some things or clarify some things. The first section is about the general knowledge about the Databricks, and especially Lakehouse. You need to be aware of with different terminology. Here comes the links, and I have them already open, so it will be faster. And you need to know the things like what's the ACID and how Databricks guarantee that. You need to understand, you need to know what is the medallion architecture and the different terminology. And I frequently refer to that section as the understanding of the marketing materials. And I absolutely hate it. I hate it so much that I never read this part of the documentation. Shame to admit. And this is the area where I had the lowest score. And one thing which I haven't done before the exam, which I would recommend you to do, not to repeat my mistakes, is to do this short course about the Databricks Lakehouse fundamentals. And it's for free. It's for free for everyone, so you don't need to be a Databricks customer. And this will really help you to clear a first set of the questions on the professional exam, which are, you can be good data engineer, good architect, but you need to be familiar with some terminology, and this will help you to get that knowledge. The next section, which I find personally more enjoyable, is structure streaming. And definitely the number one article to read. If you want to read only one article about the structure streaming, then it should be Streaming in Production, Collected Best Practices. There is part 1 and part 2, so check out both parts. And what you are going to find here, you can actually expect a lot of questions about this topic on the exam. They will ask you about triggers. What is a default trigger? It's of course half a second, but what's the difference about available now and only once? And moving forward, how to name your streams. So they are emphasizing the need of naming everything, which I agree with them completely. Or they can, I don't remember things about the RockDB in the scope of the exam. So this, you don't need to probably go deep into that. But running multiple streams on the same cluster, which is a typical practice to reduce the cost of running using a Databricks. On the professional exam, they can ask you that if you will have an issue, what can be potential cause of that issue, and they will describe the situation that you are having multiple streams. You can have a question what to do, what to change. Should you add more workers or something else? And I think it's really important to get familiar with this document over here, and then check out the part number 2, which will be about, I don't even remember, monitoring, which monitoring is important. So you can expect things about the monitoring, how to check if you have a variety set up partitions for your data, or how to check the memory utilization. So you need to be familiar with that. Basically those best practices, this is, as name suggests, it's just something what is very typical of this type of the exams. Here in those articles they are giving you a lot of example. The best way is to run your own cluster and go into your own cluster, check if you can interpret what you see on your own screen, and that's the first thing. Then watermarks are also important topic, and you can expect them on the exam. Again, why do you use the watermarks? What is the benefit of using the watermark? Do you need to use a watermark when you don't need to use a watermark? So this is important thing, and it's not so easy to grasp at the beginning, but you will read something about it and you will get it. Then we have another, it's pretty big article, Delta table streaming reads and writes. So what we are going to have here, we will start talking about the change data capture. There will be questions about that. Moving forward, we will have some examples similar as in the repository. So this will be some kind of the repetition of the code. We will talk again about stream static joins. On the exam, on the professional exam, you can also expect the questions about the stream joins. Probably not many, because this is a bit more advanced than joining stream and static, but still. And of course, you need to know for the professional Databricks certificate exam, you need to know everything about for each batch and how do you do with the deduplication, which is again explained here with merge into. This is important for the deduplication. So this is another article which is very important to go through when you are preparing for a Spark streaming part. And then an article dedicated for the stream join, which is more advanced, and you shouldn't expect a lot on the exam, but you can expect some basics questions about it. Even the question that if it's possible to join stream with the stream, and if you want to do that, what are the conditions which has to be met. So you don't need to know exactly how to do that, but you need to get the basics of it. And that's it when it's going about the articles for the structured streaming. Or I should rather say, that's it when it's going about structured streaming basics, because then you need to learn change data capture and the change data feed, which is a next level of structured streaming. And again, couple of useful articles. So the number one is upsert data into delta late table using merge. So you need to know everything about merge, how to use it, what options, when to use update, insert, delete. All of that you need to figure out, which is not difficult, but again, like with many other things, requires some practice. And what is very important, and it's here, it's how to use merge for the deduplication, which you will also see in the repository, and you will have here some examples. And they start talking here about, not yet, change data feed will be later. And again, some other article about merge. And this will be good article, how to simplify change data capture with data lake change data feed, which will have a lot of nice explanation of both of those concepts. And you need to figure out both CDC and CDF. And you can expect some questions about the CDF, which can be really nasty. Like, for instance, assuming that we already know what it is, that when you have CDF table, what happens to the table if you delete a source table? Does the CDF being deleted or not? So there can be really nasty questions about it. Plus you need to, of course, understand the concept. Why would you use it? When you would use it? What are the types of the columns you will have in the tables? So this is good articles showing a lot of explanation. So again, something recommended to go through that. And next we are having a slowly changing dimension. So this goes hand to hand with the CDC, CDF. You need to understand slowly changing dimension concept. There is a couple of types of them. You need to pay special attention to type 0, 1, and 2. And you can expect questions like they will show you a table and they will ask you which type it is, 0, 1, or 2. Or they can show you a piece of the code and they will ask you which type of the slowly changing dimension table this code is producing. So it's a really important concept for the exam. And overall, whenever you are designing a data warehouse or the data lake, it's important. And how to use another example, how to use Delta Lake change data feed on the Databricks. So some of those articles are repeating themselves, but anyway, I think that it's good to read about more advanced concept written from the different perspective. Many of those articles are written by different people and they are emphasizing different things. You can get a questions like how to turn on change data feed, or you may have a question that if you haven't turned on change data feed at the beginning when you were creating a table, can you and how turn it on later on? And another part of the articles I have is about access control. Well, based on my experience, there is very little material on the professional Databricks engineering certificate exam, which is overlapping with the associate Databricks exam. Some parts are overlapping, but Databricks is rather trying to ask you about more advanced things, which were not present on the previous exam, like access control. And basically, I have three types of the article here about the scope, clusters, and job. And you need to understand all the concept related with the access control to those three things. At least, maybe there are more aspects which I haven't thought when I was copying the link. Starting with the secret management. And here you are going to have a link to the article with the permissions and the secret deduction. And if we go to the permission part, we will see this type of the table. And the good rule is that whenever you see this type of the table, this is like a signal for you that you can get the questions about it. For instance, the question which I would create, and you can probably expect on the exam, is that if user have this type of permission, or the permission to only to read a secret, can he write to the secret scope? And of course the question is no. And another thing about the secret is what will happen if you will get a value of the secret and accidentally write it to the console. So you just do the display and the secret value. And of course you will get the value redacted. Can you go around it? Can you, besides this basic protection, can you actually print a value of the secret to the console, and how? And I can give you a tip that you can use a for loop and iterate over the secret variable. And moving forward, the same one is going about the clusters. There is a table explaining the permissions, what type of the permissions you can assign to the users. No permission can attach to, can restart, and can manage. And very natural question can be like, if the user have a permission can attach to, then can he restart a cluster? And the same one is going about the jobs. Again, you will have this type of the table. And besides that table, you should also understand if those permissions are possible to be assigned to the only users, or you can assign the same permission to the group. So can a group of the users be an owner for the job or not? And those are the type of the information you should find in those articles. And the last heavy section of links which I have for today, it's not all the links, but this is a heavy section. I have about the Delta. You need to understand more advanced concept about Delta this time. And starting with the basic article about how to configure data lake to control Delta 5 size, where they will elaborate on optimize, on auto compaction, on optimized writes. So you need to know what is the difference between auto compaction and optimized writes, and how to turn on both of them, basically what it does. Then moving forward, data skipping, it's important thing. How it happens that Databricks, whenever it reads a delta table, how it happens that some data are being skipped and why it's being skipped. Of course, to read the data faster, but how it happens. So Databricks calculate some statistics, but then what are the statistics it calculates? For how many columns? And here you will have the information that for 32 first columns. But if some columns are nested, does it still calculate for 32, or it reduces the numbers of columns for which it calculates the statistics? And the really good thing before the exam is to go into the delta log and check exactly how those files looks like and what type of the statistics it covers. It's really important to have this knowledge refresh and then try to write or update multiple times the information to the delta log and check in what format the files in the delta log appears. Is it always JSON? Because that's how we can recognize a delta log as a JSON, but is it always? Or does it after some time Databricks compact it into one larger log which is in Parquet? Maybe. And how often? So this is what you will find in this document. Then we have something about cloning the table, very basic question which you can get. I don't remember if there was such a question, but you can get if you shallow clone a table and then someone deletes the original table, what happens with yours? Yeah, very basic question. Working with the Delta Lake history, so this is again a basics, but it's good to remind yourself those things. You need to also, it's good to remind yourself the hierarchy of the object in the Databricks, metastore, catalog, schema, tables, and so on. And be ready to, answer the practical things like, if you want to delete a schema which is not empty, it's having a tables, how do you go about it? How do you delete it, if it's possible? And then things about the partitioning. So Databricks does not recommend by the default to partition the table, but there are some exceptions. And you need to know what are those exceptions, meaning when you partition the table, when and how the partition should looks like. I can imagine that there can be a type of the question that you will get the information that this is a type of the data you are receiving and which column is a good idea to use as the partition, or maybe non-column is a good idea. And then creating a table, this is the link to really the pure boring documentation, but you should know different options here. And the last link which I have here is about the constraints to the Databricks. So how to create some constraints, or more interestingly, if you have a table with some constraint and you want to write 10 records to that table, but one record does not meet the constraint. What happens? Does 9 records being written and 1 rejected, or 10 of them being written, or what happens then? So definitely to be expected. Guys, I just realized that I missed the most important article when it's going about the Delta, but it's very short. It's about understanding how the Delta log actually works and how it looks like. So if you don't know that this is the short article which should help you with. When it's going about the next articles, this will be about the MLflow, API SDK CLI, UI, notebooks, and some about the SQL. And those will not be big topics on the exam, but you will get some questions. Probably you will get some questions about those topics. If you have a hole in your knowledge when you're going about those areas, the good news is actually that it's actually really easy to patch it. And starting with the MLflow, even if you don't know how the MLflow looks like, you were never doing anything in the MLflow, as the data engineer, it's expected that you will know how to register an MLflow model. And in this article, you will have a couple of examples how to register it. So you just need to be familiar that that's the way you are registering an MLflow model and using it later on. It's pretty straightforward. This article will help you to understand the concept. Moving forward, some things about the CLI and SDK and API. You should be familiar with the concept of the CLI, that this is something what you can install on your personal computer. And I highly recommend you to do. It's short, it's easy, you don't need to be administrator, and this tutorial will explain you how to do that. And the reason you may want to do that is that more advanced you will start to be with the Databricks, there will be more and more things you will be after doing programmatically, and to do things programmatically, meaning by writing your own code or scheduling or doing different things from other software. To do that programmatically, you will be using CLI, SDK, or API. And the CLI and the type of the question you can expect on the exam is that, for instance, can you create a job through the CLI? And if you create a job with the ID of 7, and you through the CLI, you will check a status of that job ID 7, you will get in the return what type of the information? Well, you will get a job run information. So you need to know that there is such a concept like a job run ID. And the same when it's going about task. And this you can read from this article. Anyway, once you will start playing with the CLI, which I highly recommend, you will figure this out by yourself. The next thing is about the UI. Well, this is a Databricks Data Engineering Professional exam, so there is more things expected from you. And sometimes you know how to troubleshoot things, but definitely you should be able to recognize when you are going to have a problem, when you have a problem. And one of the way to recognize if you have the problem is exactly through the Spike user interface. And this article will take you briefly through it. Anyway, the best idea is to create your own cluster, run some jobs, and check how it looks like on your side, and use this document as the reference. And then a very small but interesting things, how to turn Python files into the Databricks notebook. And I can do a small spoiler. If you start a Python file with this type of the line of the code, this will become actually a Databricks notebook. Small thing, but I think those kind of small things, this is frequently differentiator more and less advanced people, and you can expect those. But at the same time, I'm not big fan of those questions, because it's not necessary. You will always remember exactly what is written here, but you should know that there is a line of the code you can put in the file, and the Databricks will treat it as the Databricks notebook. Then another thing is, and this is actually the last section, this is about SQL. And you can expect some repetition from the associate exam, different type of the unions, intersect, except. So just make sure that you refresh your knowledge before the exam, because it's just easy to forget what is the difference between only putting a union between the two tables, or putting all between two tables, or can you put all between couple of tables. And in this article you will have some examples. Then you will have examples which will help you to remind or refresh the knowledge how to deal with the nested structures, which is super typical task for the data engineers. Maybe not all of them, but in some type of the data, the nested structures are just continuously happening. And the last one is about the command explode. This is also kind of about the nested structures. So when it's going about the links for the articles, that's it. And before I will go to the last material, guys, if you know some articles or some any other material which can be helpful in the process of preparation for the Databricks Data Engineering Professional exam, please share the link in the comment section for others. I'm sure that people will appreciate. Anyway, the last material is something what is called, it's pretty interesting. It's called Big Book of Data Engineering 2nd edition. And this is how it looks like. And the idea is that this is collection of technical blogs, including code samples and notebooks. And absolutely, this is not a material which will prepare you for the exam. But let's be honest, the preparation for this professional exam can be pretty heavy. And during a break, this is somehow interesting way of consuming your time. You are going to have here a different concept explained, like including Spark streaming best practices, which I think is, in this case, it's a one-to-one copy from the page, and you saw the link before. But you are also going to have some success stories and how other companies are using the Databricks. So definitely not as the mandatory preparation material, but it's as something interesting worth reading. I keep my finger crossed for you. Let me know later on in the comment section how it goes. What was your score? What was your experience? Maybe you will find some interesting materials worth sharing. Thank you for watching and see you soon.